welcome to today's episode of What to Say and How to Say It, the podcast to help you fix your marriage. I'm Shai Lewis, and I'm here with Nina Rosner. Our mission is to help you, Christian married man or woman, navigate conflict and build connection so you can have a thriving marriage. So today our topic is what to say when there's delusion happening in the room. And just so we're clear on delusion, I went ahead and looked up the definition in case you weren't aware of what it is exactly. It says it's a false belief or judgment about external realities held despite an incontrovertible evidence to the contrary, occurring especially in mental conditions. So, all right. I know that sometimes delusion can be a good thing. Sometimes it can be a not so good thing, depending on the context, right? So we can believe something that isn't true to motivate ourselves. We can imagine ourselves to be something that we're not, just like a child has a wild imagination. We can also have instances where we believe something and it is a complete untruth. It's a lie. And then there are times whenever God leads us to believe something as a matter of faith, although we don't have the evidence of it yet. And so I want to talk about all of that, or we want to talk about all of that and the differences and how it shows up in our relationship, and help our listeners understand what to say when this shows up, because sometimes, as we said, it can be a good thing or a bad thing. So, Nina, have you had any experience with delusion in your relationships?
I think everybody on the planet has. And
Yeah.
here's the angle I'm coming at this with. Let's say that you're a secular audience member, and here you are listening to two women who believe in an invisible God that has a magic book whose primary character and savior of the universe died and rose again. Yeah, all right, sure. That sounds delusional. I've been an atheist. Like, I thought people were crazy.
Yeah.
I really did. And so okay, well, so what? So, we believe we're right. We believe we are in the know. And we've had all Christians who really have solid faith have had some spiritual experiences. That's not been just reading from a book and then using it as a guideline to have a less sucky life. It's been these incredible moments where you're like, how could I know something I couldn't possibly know? How could all of these things line up the way that they did, like to the penny? Like, how does that happen? And outcomes and just things. So, and then you hear the voices, like, that sounds pretty delusional. I hear the voice of God. Sometimes it's on a handful of times, it's been literally audible. Like, is there someone in the room with me that just said that thing aloud?
Yeah.
That's rare. In my experience, I'm sure there's people where it's not, but for me, but I believe I hear the voice of God. Does that make me delusional? Well, that depends on who you ask. And so that's how I want to approach this subject today, because it depends on who you ask is totally relevant, whether you're Christian or whether you're not. So, and I'm couching this in an experience I had, and I've had a couple of these. There's people that I've tried to help that at some point, and there's not very many, but there's two people that come to mind specifically that I've said to them, I can't help you. And the reason I haven't been able to help them is they've been so deeply entrenched in the problem being their spouse and the way their spouse behaves and the way their spouse is XYZ. They won't see, they're completely blind. There's zero self-awareness internally or externally around their own behavior, their own solid, stiff-necked, stuck ways of thinking. I had a gentleman this summer that I said, I do love you. I believe you love the Lord. I also know that until this thing moves, there's no way that anything's going to be any different. And that's what's true. So you have this, not you, but people have these ways of thinking about things, and that's their reality. And the tighter we hold on to that, the less likely we are to be able to see anything but that. So from our inside that experience, because all of us have these things, we think we know what somebody else is thinking. We think we know their motive. We blame them for whatever. That's a space within us that should be challenged. Because usually, I mean, the data says we don't know that to be true. We're wrong more often than not. There's actually studies around this with married people who've been together for a long time. Yeah, you're right, a little more often than complete strangers, but yeah, not that much. Like, it's still an F. Like, you can't get an A in this. It's just impossible percentage-wise of the time that you're right. And then the other piece of it is, okay, I have to recognize that that exists in other people. And so when I'm confronted with that, I need to be really wise in how I choose to interact with it. So have I had experience with it? I think daily we're all experiencing our own and other people's delusional mindsets. I know, look at you roll your eyes over that. That's funny. Probably not what we should encourage people with at all here, I guess, maybe.
Well, it's so tricky, because it's like, you don't want to like be, Debbie Downer. You don't want to step on people's dreams. You don't want to accuse people of lying. It may be that what they see is in fact something God showed them. And then, you don't know, but then it's like, they could also be psycho. So
well, yeah, there's that, right? I mean, you look at the people in the Bible. Noah was probably looked at as, hey, how's your boat coming for 100 years?
Yeah.
Exactly. How's the crazy guy? Isn't that guy building the boat your dad? Yeah, we don't talk about him. Yeah, that guy. That's an unfortunate reality. The things that we go through, people, I've been told by multiple people, you're crazy if you think XYZ, all sorts of stuff. And these are people that know me well, and it's usually right before I'm going to do something, like get a book published or start something. And like, you're crazy if you think that that's actually going to happen. And then it does. And they're like, oh, and I don't need to go back and fix that. I've learned to deal with people who don't get me. That's okay. And the neat thing is that when we focus on the Lord, we don't need to have that kind of understanding in our lives that we naturally long for, because we're wired to want that. But really, the only person that gets us is God. Right. So, and if you're gonna, like, you think of, I think it's delusional to be an entrepreneur, to start a ministry. You have to be half crazy because something exists only in your head. Yeah, that's it. Now, it's a positive delusion,
right?
And a lot of people go do it, but it is a delusion. It is not real. And then you go and create it and hang in there. Like, then people go, I guess you weren't crazy, but it takes a while. Like Noah and his boat. Oh, there's a boat there. Oh, wait, hey, can we come?
Yeah. He's not delusional anymore when the flood happens.
Yeah. So that's all the positive, and all of that.
Yeah.
But the other side of this, and this is the dark underbelly of just the evil that lurks in lots of relationships, and probably for a lot of our listeners, hence they're listening in the first place, because why would you be here if you weren't trying to fix your marriage, right? Sometimes your partner's delusional about who you are. Sometimes your partner's delusional about what they think you've done or not done. And it is that, boy, that's a pain. That is, and I'm not talking about, boy, that's just an annoyance. I'm talking about that is a pain that shreds your heart, because you want to be known by that person more than anybody else on the planet. That's the one you want to know you. And they don't.
Yeah.
They don't.
Yeah, so that's what we want to get into a little bit today, because, we're here to help our listeners know how to show up in these hard situations, specifically Christian married men and women. So if you don't do this well, you can walk away with damaged relationships. You want to handle delusions, good, bad, or indifferent, with care. And there are some things we think that you can take away from these awkward and difficult situations. All right, so you mentioned Noah, and I love that, because if there's anybody that, yes, we can think of in the Bible that might have been called delusional, it would be Noah. He was delusional in a good way, obviously. But the time, let's just say, and this isn't in the Bible, so we're not quoting scripture, but let's just say he was being called delusional the whole time.
Oh man.
He was building that boat, and
Long suffering.
yeah, exactly. If you're the person being called delusional, what would you be able to say if indeed, because we can approach this from two ways. You can be the person called delusional, and you can be someone that thinks someone else is delusional. If you're Noah and you're being called delusional, what's a healthy way to respond to those that we love who think we are absolutely out of our minds?
Yeah. So let's go through the options, because I believe no matter what side of this coin you're on, whether whether you want to label this as delusion or call it wrong mindset or, wrong thinking patterns, like whatever it is, I believe the answer to how do you handle it, what do you say, is the same. Whether you're being accused of this or whether you think somebody else is crazy, what do you do with that? Well, let's talk about what does not work. How about we shove our opinion down their throat? How about we argue? How about we come right out, both guns blaring, well, you're wrong because, and I defend my position, or I argue and tell you what you're, put you in your place. That's not biblical, right? Even Nathan and David, when Nathan approached David, David's doing all these terrible, horrible things. And Nathan comes to him, he tells him a story, and he approaches it from the side. He does it very respectfully. And he asks him, what would you do if this was the situation with this, this guy doing these things? And David's incensed. And he says, well, we ought to da, 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 da. And Nathan says, well, dude, it's you. Okay. Pin drop. All right. So nobody in the Bible, even in the, well, not nobody, but you see some confrontations, but you have to look at the context of those. In general, overall, we're to be loving, we're to be quick to listen, slow to speak, and even slower to become angry. So if we're dealing with somebody's delusion that they're imposing on us, telling us their thing, they're crazy, and let's say it's a negative thing, because nobody's listening. Let's just be real. Nobody's listening to us because they want to know how they can support their spouse with their crazy dream. They're here because their spouse has got this crazy belief about them or about what they should be doing, and it's destroying everything, right?
Right.
It's in the way.
Right.
And so let's go, well, we could fight verbally with them. That doesn't work, and we're not supposed to do that. Okay. Then second thing is, well, how do you confront a brother's sin against you? Well, you would do that gently. Okay. All the instructions in there are about, and it better be a sin against you, because most of the time other people's beliefs are just their beliefs.
Yeah.
Right. So, and this is a thing I want to point out. If you have, and the guy I was talking about earlier, just refused to believe that his wife wasn't crazy. Like, he kept blaming her for being messed up, and there was something wrong with her, and there's, she needs to. And one of the conversations that we had was, if you had a 7-year-old that had a nightmare and believed there's a monster under their bed, I think most parenting experts would say, well, if you flip the light on and tell them, go back to sleep, there's nothing under your bed. That's done absolutely nothing to comfort the child.
Right.
They need comfort. And so what do you do? Well, good parents would go in and, well, you got kids. If they had nightmares, like, what do you do with them? What do they need from you, Shai?
Yeah. I mean, definitely comfort. They will need to know that they are safe.
Mm.
And nothing will change until that happens. I can guarantee you that they might end up sleeping in the bed the whole night
Mhm.
if they don't feel safe. That's
Right.
how it goes. Yeah.
Yeah. So and sometimes they don't take your word for it if you just stand there and say, well, there's nothing under your bed. Like you haven't even looked yet. So they want to see you look.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
might even want to get down there with you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Keep
then
the light on all night.
yeah.
Have a night light or something. Yeah.
But they don't want to be told that they're stupid and childish for being afraid. The reality is that's what they fear. They're feeling, they're afraid. And to deny somebody else's experience, even if it is not true,
Oof.
makes them stuck and keeps them hanging on to that. It increases the level of fear in children to be treated that way. So, and then it degrades their identity as well. So the proper response is to, yeah, I mean, there's people now selling monster spray, right? Like, you know, you can spray I don't know. Anyway, but the point is that you validate it. You validate where they're coming from. You're not saying you're right. There's a monster in here. We should run. You know, what you're saying is you're right. You're afraid. I see that. I hear you. That's awful. I hate this for you. Let's walk through this thing. Let's figure this out together. And in the best situation, they trust you, and you're able to hand them a sword, even if it's a Bible verse, or maybe it's a real plastic sword, or whatever it is. But with adults, we got to do the same thing.
Yeah.
Because if we're not validating their experience, we're helping them stay stuck because they long to be heard. They're trying to connect. They need help in those moments.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of helping them, it's the verbal, boot to the face, like, get over yourself. Like, wow, okay, that's caring and compassionate. No, even Jesus with Martha and Mary, when Mary's not pitching in and Martha's losing her mind because there's a lot of people to feed and there's stuff happening. Jesus validates her. He's like, Martha, you are concerned about a lot of things here.
Mm-hmm.
And then he tells her Mary's doing the right thing. So he doesn't sell Mary out. He doesn't sell Martha out. He also doesn't solve her problem, right? But she didn't ask for that. She just went and complained, and he validated her state.
Mm-hmm.
And boy, I don't know if that's not what Jesus does for us by showing up on the planet when we were still sinners, while we are still sinners on a daily basis. Like, he's still there with us in that. Coming and being with, that's what validation is. Wow, this is hard for you. I can't believe it. Yeah, absolutely. This is difficult. And so it's hard to do when their delusion is about you,
Mm-hmm.
but it's still the right answer. Always the right answer. And if we can't validate, we're triggered. If we're triggered, we got work to do on our own. Figure out, what's that about? What am I believing that I can't be with this person in this no matter what?
Yeah.
Are you a Christian man or woman who's done everything you know to do, and yet you're still stuck? Maybe you've lost hope. You feel alone. You're discouraged. Like, I get that. I know. And yet you don't want to rip your family to shreds by divorcing. But you can't just keep dealing with the conflict. It's so bad. Did you know that couples who only learn to do conflict better are still not happy? We'll teach you how to turn conflict into connection, but we'll also show you the other research, the must-haves for your relationship to bring joy and connection to your marriage. Like, if you don't get that piece, the positive inputs, and they're real specific, it won't matter that you can do conflict. Go to greaterimpact.org and sign up for 2.0 Your Marriage today. Stop the pain. Create the relationship you want today.
Yeah, and that's a work in itself, and we talk a lot about that, and how you have to do the steps and have self-awareness in order to really show up and be available for others. But what I also wanted to point out is sometimes we're delusional about the reality of our situation, and I'm sure you I'm sure you encounter this in
Yeah.
coaching and, and how we, want people to move forward, and we want to see God change and grow us and all the things, but sometimes we're just stuck in a reality that isn't real.
Mhm.
And I'm curious as to what to say is
Mhm.
when a person is in that situation where it may not be about them or the other person. It may just be the truth about their situation in itself, and being able to accept, what is and what God has allowed in order for them to take a step forward. And sometimes it's time that they need. Sometimes it's you know disappointment, enough of it over and over again
Yeah.
for them to get there. And sometimes God leads us to say something. And so I'm curious if you've been in a situation where there is something to say, if we're the ones that can kind of see
Mhm.
but they can't, the
Yeah.
reality of what's happening.
Yeah. So if I understand you properly, you're talking about somebody, let's say it's a woman whose husband's having an affair and she's refusing to believe the reality of that.
Good
And you-
example.
yeah. And so you see them together, the guy and the girl at the grocery store, and you're like, whoa, and you see him kiss her. And then now you know this thing. So you have inside information. It could be that, it could be anything,
Yeah.
right? It could be, whatever it is. But so, and let's say this is a good friend of yours.
Mhm.
So I'm a huge fan of asking permission. The way to blow up a friendship or any relationship is to assume that you know the answer and you got to go school this person, and that's just pride. So I'm going to say, hey, are you open to hearing something that I think you might want to know?
Yeah.
And they're going to be like, well, yeah. And then you want to communicate intention, which is, I know that there's been a number of people that have told you that this is going on. And I don't want to be somebody that gets added to the list of people that are hurting you. And at the same time, I saw something you need to know about. And I just, if I was in your shoes and even exactly the same, I would want to know this. I would want you to take a risk with me and let me know. And that's kind of what I'm doing here is I know what your position is already. You've communicated that. And at the same time, I want to take a risk with you and just give you what I saw happen. Are you open to hearing that? And so you'd communicate your heart around it. Let's say it's somebody that's got an addiction to drugs, and they don't know that they're drinking too much, whatever it is. And you see them start to do things behaviorally that are not awesome for them or their family or whatever. And so you ask permission. Hey, can we have kind of a hard conversation about something that I'm only bringing up because I love you so much? So you ask permission, you communicate intent, and they're going to be like, well, what is it? And it's like, I don't want to hurt you with this. And I'm only saying something because I think it's a problem. And I would hope that you would do this with me if you saw the same thing in my life. Last night when we were together and you'd had 4 drinks and you insisted you were okay, you got really, really angry when we tried to get you to take a cab or let one of us drive you home. You said things that were mean, and I love you. And do you remember what you said? Do you remember how that went? And so you start the conversation with a question, right? So you give some fact and then you ask a question. So there's that piece of it. So that's the, how do you handle it when it's, that situation? So when you have somebody imposing their thing on you and it's about you, and this is, I think, a really important what to say. let's say that we're not triggered and they're accusing you. Let's say you haven't done the thing that they are saying you did. They're
Mhm.
sure that you did,
Mhm.
and they have quote evidence that's hello, not evidence, right?
Mhm.
And you're 100% sure you're not doing this thing that they think you're doing or whatever. You listen to them and you go, okay, so if I hear you properly, you believe that the reason I was able to buy a new car, the reason I got a new car is because I'm stealing money from my company, and you've seen some shady things that I've done, and you believe that I'm flipping the books and I'm taking money. That's what you're seeing here. Well, yeah, tell me more about that. Why do you believe this? And you listen to it, you validate that, you repeat it back to them, and then you say, this is, it must have been hard for you to, confront me like this with
Mhm.
this belief of yours. Well, yeah, because you know what? I really value the heart you have behind this. And I want to reassure you, I'm not doing that. And if you want to talk more about how all those things you're concerned about came to be, I'm happy to do that. But your concerns, they're not, that's not a thing. But thanks for letting me know. So you validate, you show appreciation for their heart, and you say it's not true, and you don't explain. That's the thing right there. You don't justify, you don't defend, you don't do it. It's disrespecting yourself to entertain somebody else's fantasy at that level. It's disrespecting yourself to get wounded by the misplaced, inaccurate belief of someone else. And if they insist, here's what to say. Yeah, I hear you, and I appreciate your concern. It's not true, and I'm not going to talk about it anymore. Please don't bring it up again. You can believe that if you want to about me, but I'm done talking about it.
These are great. However, there's always a however. Sometimes the person is in denial.
Mhm.
And they really, like, they might tell you this is not true, but you have evidence. And there's this place of they are not in reality.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I guess, I mean, because you can't validate that. You can listen to it, but you can't really validate. Well, maybe you can. I don't know.
Yeah, you can validate everything unless you're being prideful. Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
You can validate everything, but you're not let's talk about what are we validating?
Yeah.
Are we validating what they believe to be true, or are we validating their experience and their feelings?
Ooh.
We're validating the person and their experience and their feelings,
Okay.
right?
Right.
And
Okay.
yeah. So if your friend is like, I did not drink too much, you're too sensitive, I can't believe you took that personally. And then you go, okay, well, it hurt my feelings and I just wanted you to know about it. Sounds like you're pretty sure that's not a thing. Okay. And then now you know what your reality is here. Now you know, right? And we always have to also be humble, because our so-called proof may be us being too sensitive. I've had a client, well, not recently, a couple of years back. She was 100% sure that her husband was having an affair, multiple affairs. This woman, that woman, this woman, that woman. And yeah, ended up working with both of them. And it's like, no, he wasn't. Like, she would follow him when he left for work in her car. She'd pack up all the kids and then drive to see if he actually went to work. And he was always there. But she had a, yeah. So we don't always know what's true. And we can get in that place sometimes. Like, the enemy's really good at what he does.
Yeah.
And I've had people think that their spouse was, addicted to shopping or addicted to alcohol, and they'd spend $25 a month or have one drink a week and think there was addiction there. Like, it's what? No, let's, what's, so we have to look at when we're going to deal with this kind of stuff, we have to have the possibility that we're actually wrong,
Yeah.
a humble heart around it.
Right.
Because if we don't, then that's going to create more problems.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so much room for error, and so, which means there's so much room for the enemy to play. The mind is very, very powerful. We can convince ourselves of things that aren't even real. We can deny what is real. And depending on how mature we are, it can cause a lot of confusion. And
Mhm.
so the reason I wanted to bring this up is because we need to be aware. We need to be aware of ourselves, and also know how to handle each other in a gentle way. And I hope our listeners have come away with some good tips around that. And, if you're a Noah and you're just obeying God and you look like you're delusional or crazy, there's a way to respond to that, versus if, you're David and you're just not really facing reality. There's also a way to approach a person in that situation. But the key I'm hearing is really validate the person. Maybe not what the reality is or isn't, but you can at least show up and validate the person. A couple other tips for you before we wrap up: make sure you're not arguing. This is also a place where the enemy loves to play, is in disagreement, discord. Be quick to listen, so slow to speak, as the word tells us. Be gentle. If you have to confront sin, there's a process God lays out for us in Matthew 18 for that. If they really are struggling, you can sit with them in that and comfort them. Think of what you do with children when they're afraid. Comfort them, validate them. Communicate your heart for them. If they're in denial and it's someone you love, let them know that you love them and that you're here for them and your heart wants them to heal. And if it's about you and you're not triggered, don't justify or explain yourself. Again, validate what they're saying. And if it's too much, tell them or ask them for permission to just not speak about it anymore. So anyway, lots of good tips. We hope that you enjoyed today's conversation. We want you to do something with what you've learned. If you have time, check out our website, greaterimpact.org. We've got a free PDF that you can download called How to Stop Walking, 5 Tools for How to Stop Walking on Eggshells. If you're interested in leveling up, there's an e-course called Strength and Dignity for Women. And we are also looking at building a course for couples. So be on the lookout for that. And if you want to learn more, you can always check out our videos on this channel. And please don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for joining us today. We will see you next time.